He built an empire on blood and betrayal. But on the day he's set to marry for power, the woman he abandoned walks in, holding his twins. Now the city that once feared his name will watch him crumble. Mafia Boss attended a wedding smiling, until his ex walked in with twins in her arms. Stay till the end, because love just became the deadliest revenge. New York never truly slept. It only hid its monsters under the hum of car engines and the blur of neon lights. And when Aiden Cross stepped out of his black car, the city seemed to hold its breath. Every whisper in the underworld carried his name like a threat. The youngest mafia boss in Manhattan's history. The man who could buy loyalty or bury betrayal, sometimes in the same conversation. Inside the towering glass headquarters of Cross Enterprises, silence followed him like a shadow. His employees lowered their eyes as he passed, as if his ice blue stare might pierce through their lies. The elevator doors slid open, and the faint reflection of his own face stared back at him. Sharp jawline, perfect tie, expression carved from control. The devil in a suit. Aiden's office occupied the top floor. Glass walls, dark marble, a view that turned the city into a kingdom. But today, his mind wasn't on territory or money. It was on her, Lena Hayes. She'd been his secretary for a year, efficient, quiet, too perceptive for her own good. Most women in his orbit were drawn to power or terrified of it. Lena wasn't either. She treated him like a man, not a god or a monster, and that was dangerous. She was already there when he entered, her brown hair tied neatly, her eyes lifting to meet his with that calm, steady defiance that always cut through his armor. "Good morning, Mr. Cross," she said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Your schedule," and the Italian partners confirmed the shipment. Her voice was soft, but it carried a quiet authority. He nodded, taking the folder without looking. "And the background check on Moretti?" "Clean," she said, "but there's something off. His men have been circling the east docks again." Aiden's eyes flicked up. "You saw them?" She hesitated, and for the first time, he saw a trace of worry beneath her professional calm. "Last night. I stayed late. They were watching the building. He didn't like that. No one touched what was his, not his business, not his people, not her." He leaned back, studying her. "If you ever see them again, you call me directly, understood?" She blinked. "Even if it's after hours," especially then. A silence stretched between them, something heavy, unspoken. He turned away first, pretending to check his watch. "Reschedule my afternoon meetings," he said. "I'm going to the warehouse," she frowned. "The docks aren't safe tonight." "There's talk about Lena," he cut in, voice low. When were they ever safe? The docks reeked of salt and smoke when Aiden arrived that evening. Rain fell in thin sheets, soaking the pavement, the air cold enough to bite. He moved with purpose, his black coat flowing behind him, his men flanking him silently. The sound of waves clashing against steel echoed like gunfire in the distance. Inside the warehouse, everything looked normal, too normal. Stacks of crates, papers in order, guards stationed, but his instincts clawed at him. Something was wrong. He motioned for his men to spread out. The sound of footsteps echoed through the vast space. Then, a metallic click. "Boss!" One of his men shouted. Gunfire erupted. Bullets shattered the calm, tearing through the air like screaming ghosts. Aiden ducked behind a crate. Drawing his gun with deadly precision, he returned fire. Each shot a perfect calculation, but the ambush was coordinated, professional. Too clean to be random. He'd been set up. "Move!" he barked. Two of his men fell. Another shouted something he couldn't hear over the chaos, and then he saw her, Lena, standing by the side door, frozen, eyes wide. She shouldn't have been there. He ran toward her as a shot rang out, aimed straight for her chest. Instinct overrode thought. He lunged, grabbing her by the waist, pulling her down behind a crate. The bullet splintered wood inches above her head. "Are you insane?" he hissed, shielding her with his body. I followed you, she gasped. You weren't answering your phone. Her voice broke. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. He gritted his teeth. You shouldn't have come. Neither should you, she shot back. The corner of his mouth twitched. Even as adrenaline surged through him, even in chaos, she managed to challenge him. He rose, firing 2 clean shots into the shadows. The gunfire stopped. Silence fell again, broken only by the rain. Bodies lay motionless. The attackers were gone. Aiden lowered his weapon, scanning the scene. His men regrouped, wounded but alive. He turned to her. She was trembling, her clothes streaked with dust. But her eyes were steady. You could have died, he said quietly. So could you. Her defiance hit him harder than the bullets. For a heartbeat, something inside him cracked. A soundless fracture in the armor he'd spent years building. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His fingers hovered, then pulled back. He couldn't afford softness. Not here. Not with her. Come on, he said roughly. We're leaving. She followed without a word. But he felt her gaze on him all the way to the car. It burned more than the pain in his shoulder. By the time they returned to his office, dawn was bleeding into the skyline. Aiden walked to his desk, poured himself a drink, and stared out the glass wall. The city glittered beneath him, his empire, untouchable, dangerous, cold. Lena stood quietly by the door, her hands clasped. You saved my life, she said softly. He didn't turn. Don't thank me. You're under my protection. That's all. Protection, she echoed. That's what you call it. He glanced over his shoulder, his expression unreadable. What would you call it? Her eyes met his. Something you don't want to name. For a second, silence pressed between them again, electric and suffocating. Then she turned and left, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Aiden sank into his chair. Exhaling slowly, he wasn't supposed to care. Caring made men weak. Weak men didn't survive. But her face wouldn't leave his mind. Not that night. Not when he closed his eyes. When he arrived at his office the next morning, his assistant looked pale. Sir, she said, voice trembling. This was delivered for you. A single envelope lay on his desk, deep crimson, sealed with black wax. No name. No return address. He opened it carefully. Inside, one line in elegant handwriting. You took what's mine. Now I'll take yours. DM Aiden's jaw tightened. The paper crumpled in his hand. He looked out the window again, over the city that feared him. For the first time in years, the devil in the suit felt something colder than power, something like dread. Outside his office window across the street, a red laser sight flickered, aimed perfectly at his chest. The city hadn't slept since the ambush. Neither had Aiden Cross. In his world, silence wasn't peace. It was the pause before another bullet. And tonight, the silence felt louder than gunfire. He stood by the window of his penthouse, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. Below him, New York pulsed like a living organism, lights blinking, sirens echoing, the underworld crawling beneath its skin. Every shadow was a threat, every name a potential traitor, except hers. Lena Hayes. She sat across the room, reading a report he'd given her, unaware that his gaze had lingered far too long. A week ago, she was his secretary. Now she was under his protection. That was what he told his men. But it was a lie he told himself too. Protection wasn't why she was here. She was here because after the ambush, Aiden couldn't shake the memory of her face when he pulled her from the gunfire. The shock, the trust, the way her hand had clung to his jacket as if it were life itself. He'd seen countless people bleed out. He'd never cared. But if that bullet had found her, he didn't finish the thought. Do you ever sleep? She asked quietly, breaking his trance. Her voice cut through the room's heavy air. He turned, noticing the faint fatigue under her eyes. Not well, he said. Nightmares. He smirked slightly. Real ones, the kind that don't end when I wake up. She closed the file, crossing her legs with calm defiance. You know, for someone who controls the city, you sound a lot like someone running from it. He stared at her. And you sound like someone who doesn't understand survival. Maybe not, she said softly. But I understand loneliness. That word hit him harder than any insult could. He looked away, the glass trembling slightly in his hand. Loneliness is a luxury, he muttered. It means you still have a heart left to feel it. Her eyes softened. But she said nothing more. The air between them shifted. No longer boss and employee, but two broken people circling the same void. Days blurred into nights. Lena became more involved in his inner circle, assisting with logistics, meetings, and strategy. Aiden's men whispered behind closed doors, unsure what to make of her presence. But Aiden didn't care. He found himself drawn to her voice in meetings, her calm precision in chaos. She spoke like she belonged, and part of him started to believe she did. Late one night, after everyone else had gone, she lingered in his office again. They were alone, only the hum of the city outside filling the silence. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. He looked up from his papers. "Regret what?" "Becoming this." She gestured vaguely toward him. The power, the darkness, the untouchable man in the suit. He set down his pen. "Regret gets you killed in my world." "That's not an answer." He leaned back, eyes narrowing. "You think you can handle the truth?" "I wouldn't ask if I couldn't." For the first time, he let his mask slip. "My father was killed by the people I now own. My brother betrayed me before he could drink legally. I built this empire so no one could ever control me again." Her breath caught. "So this," she gestured around the luxurious office, "isn't power to you. It's armor." Exactly. Their eyes met. In that moment, the devil looked human, and the woman who feared nothing began to fear how much she cared. By midnight, she was still there, helping him sort through documents from his warehouses. Her laughter slipped out once, small, tired, but real. It startled him. He hadn't heard genuine laughter in this room in years. "Careful," he said dryly. "You're making this place sound alive." She smiled faintly. "Maybe it needs to be." He didn't answer, but when she reached for another file, his hand brushed hers. For a second, the world stopped spinning. Neither pulled away. The city lights reflected off the glass, painting them in fractured gold and shadow. Then, without a word, she gathered her things and left. The sound of the elevator doors closing lingered in his ears long after she was gone. 3 nights later, Aiden called her into his office again. This time his voice was low, guarded. "There's a leak," he said. "Information's getting out." She froze. "From where?" "That's what I'm trying to find out." His gaze held hers a little too long, and something unspoken passed between them. Mistrust, fear, and something darker neither could name. "I want you to oversee the new communication logs," he said finally. "No one else touches them." She nodded, though her pulse quickened. "Understood." But later that night, when she returned to his office to drop off a file, something strange caught her eye. A small glint of metal under his desk, barely visible in the shadows. Curious, she crouched down. There, tucked beneath the edge of the mahogany, was a thin black device with a blinking red light, a recording transmitter. Her stomach twisted. Someone had been listening. She reached for it with trembling fingers. Pride. It loose and froze when she saw the label on the back. Cross Systems Internal Surveillance. His own company, his own office. He'd been recording everything, every word, every breath, every conversation they'd shared. Her throat went dry. She backed away, heart pounding. Had he known she'd find it? Was this another test? The idea of him watching, listening. It felt like betrayal disguised as protection. By morning, she'd barely slept. She walked into the office, composed on the outside, breaking on the inside. Aiden looked up when she entered, his expression unreadable. "Rough night?" he asked casually. She forced a smile. "You could say that." He nodded slowly, almost knowingly, and went back to his work. The sound of his pen scratching against paper filled the silence. She placed the transmitter on his desk. It hit the wood with a soft click. He froze. "Lose something?" she asked, her voice like glass, polished, sharp. He looked at the device, then at her. No emotion showed, but the tension in the room thickened like smoke. "Where did you find it?" "Under your desk." A pause. "Maybe someone planted it," he said evenly. "Maybe," she replied. "But I checked the serial number." His eyes narrowed. "It traces back to my computer," she whispered. The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. For a long moment, neither spoke. He searched her face for deception. She searched his for mercy. Neither found what they were looking for. The office lights flickered. The intercom crackled to life with an unfamiliar voice. "Cross," the voice hissed. "You're both already dead. Check your inbox." Aiden's phone buzzed. One new message. No sender. He opened it. A single photo appeared on the screen. Him and Lena, standing together in the warehouse weeks ago. A red X scrawled over both their faces. The storm outside had been raging for hours. Thunder rolled through the Manhattan skyline like a warning Aiden refused to hear. Inside the Crosstower boardroom, his empire was collapsing one whisper at a time. 12 of his most loyal lieutenants sat around the table. Men who'd once killed for him without hesitation, now staring at him with unease. The air reeked of accusation. "She's the leak," said one of them, voice edged with venom. "You know it, boss. That woman's been too close for too long." Aiden didn't flinch. His blue eyes, cold as glacial steel, swept across the room. "She saved my life," he said flatly. "She's not the problem." "Then what is?" another man snapped. "Because someone's been feeding intel to Moretti, and it started after you brought her in." Murmurs rippled around the room. For the first time, doubt hung in the air like smoke. Aiden leaned forward, his tone low, dangerous. "Careful with your words. The next man who accuses her without proof will be picking teeth out of his throat." Silence fell, but he saw it in their eyes, fear mixed with distrust. His empire, once unquestionable, was beginning to fracture from within. And in that fracture, Dante Moretti's shadow was spreading. When the meeting ended, Aiden stayed behind. Rain drummed against the glass walls of his office, a rhythm that sounded too much like war drums. He lit a cigarette he didn't need just to keep his hands from shaking. He didn't want to believe it. Could Lena have betrayed him? No, she wouldn't. She couldn't. But logic was cruel. It whispered that someone close was feeding Moretti's people information about shipments, routes, schedules, and Lena was the only new variable in his inner circle. He exhaled smoke, watching it curl into the air like ghosts of old promises. He'd built an empire on control. But this woman, this quiet, infuriating, loyal woman, had cracked his control in half. The elevator chimed behind him. Lena stepped out, holding a stack of files, unaware of the storm gathering around her. "You called for me?" Her voice was calm, trusting. He stared at her too long before speaking. "Sit down." She frowned, sensing something off. "Aiden?" He didn't use her name often, and when he did, it usually came wrapped in danger or desire. Tonight, it carried both. He slid a folder toward her. Inside were photographs, grainy surveillance stills from a shipment gone wrong, men dead, cargo missing. The timestamp matched the night she'd been in charge of rerouting communications. "What is this?" she whispered. "You tell me." She looked up, eyes wide. "You think I don't think anything," he said, voice clipped. "But I need answers." Her lips trembled. "Aiden, you know me. You've seen what I've seen people die because I trusted the wrong person." He cut in, colder now. "Don't make me regret this too." The room felt smaller. Her pulse pounded in her ears. "You think I'd sell you out? After everything?" "I think everyone has a price," he said quietly. Her hand slapped the table before she could stop herself. "Then you never knew me at all." For a long moment he said nothing, then softer. "That's what scares me." Hours later she sat alone in her apartment, trembling with fury and heartbreak. The man who once protected her now saw her as a threat. She wanted to scream. Instead she worked, scanning files, tracing calls, hunting for the leak herself. If she could find the real traitor, maybe she could clear her name. Maybe he'd believe her again. Across town, Aiden's convoy was ready to move. 4 armored SUVs, 2 decoys, 1 destination, the South Pier, where he was meeting a potential ally to salvage the truce with Moretti. The night smelled of salt, gun oil, and deception. His instinct screamed not to go, but backing down wasn't in his blood. Lena showed up at the last second. "I'm coming with you," she said. He turned sharply. "No, you're not." "You think I'm a traitor? Fine, let me prove you wrong." He almost told her no. Almost. But the fire in her eyes, defiant, desperate, broke him again. "Stay in the second car," he said finally. "Don't get out." The convoy rolled into the night. The city lights faded into the rain-streaked dark. Halfway to the pier, Aiden's instinct screamed. The streets were too empty, the silence too clean. Then, without warning, a flash of light. A deafening explosion tore through the laid car. Metal screamed. Tires shredded. Aiden's vehicle swerved as gunfire erupted from the rooftops. "Ambush!" someone yelled. Aiden grabbed his gun, shoving open the door as bullets ricocheted off steel. His men fell one by one. He fired back, precise, lethal, a storm in human form. Then he saw her, Lena, stepping out of her car despite his orders, running toward him through the rain. "Get back!" he shouted. She didn't listen. A figure appeared on the rooftop, a sniper, rifle raised. Time slowed. Aiden turned toward the glint of metal. The shot rang out. Lena threw herself forward, the bullet slamming into her side. Her scream cut through the chaos. Aiden caught her before she hit the ground, blood soaking into his hands. "Lena, no, stay!" "With me," he said, voice cracking for the first time in years. Her breathing was shallow. "Told you, I'm not a traitor." He pressed his hand over the wound. "Don't talk. You're not dying here." But she was fading fast. "Boss, we have to move," one of his men shouted. Aiden's jaw clenched. He lifted her into his arms, ignoring the bullets flying past. He'd carried dying men before. Never someone who mattered. He didn't remember getting back to the car, only her blood on his suit and the sound of sirens in the distance. The hospital smelled of bleach and despair. Aiden sat beside her bed, his hand wrapped around hers, refusing to let go. Machines beeped steadily. Every sound was a countdown. His mind replayed every word they'd said, every accusation, every doubt. He'd questioned her loyalty, and she'd taken a bullet meant for him. He felt something foreign clawing at his chest. Guilt. Hours passed. She didn't wake. He didn't move. By morning, the doctor came in. "She'll live," he said quietly. "But she'll need rest, a lot of it." Aiden nodded, relief breaking through the fog. He brushed his thumb over her knuckles, whispering something only the night could hear. He didn't notice his advisor entering until he spoke. "You look tired," the older man said. Aiden didn't respond. The advisor stepped closer. "You've built this empire on fear and respect. But now, they're seeing you bleed over a woman." Aiden's eyes flicked up, sharp as razors. "Careful. It's the truth," the man said evenly. "If you love her, you'll lose everything. Your allies, your power, the truce, all of it." The words hit harder than bullets. He looked back at Lena, pale still, breathing softly. He could almost hear her voice in his head, the way she'd said his name like it meant something human. Love was a weakness. He'd always known that, but knowing it didn't make it hurt less. When dawn broke, Aiden stood by the window of his office, staring at the city bleeding into gold. His signature waited at the bottom of the truce agreement with Moretti, one line of ink, one choice. He picked up the pen. His hand trembled once, then, steady, controlled, he signed. The deal was sealed. Peace for power, survival for sacrifice. The final clause stared back at him. All personal attachments subject to termination. Aiden's reflection in the glass looked like a ghost. He whispered to no one. "I'm sorry, Lena." Behind him the phone rang. He answered without looking. A cold voice on the other end said, "Congratulations on the truce, Mr. Cross. Shame about the girl. She didn't make it through the night." The line went dead. Aiden froze, then crushed the phone. In his hand as the city woke to the sound of sirens, morning came without mercy. The city stretched beneath gray clouds. Indifferent to the war, one man was fighting within himself. Aiden Cross didn't go to the hospital that morning. He didn't send flowers, didn't call, didn't look back. He simply vanished from her world as cleanly as a shadow, stepping out of the light. The decision had been made hours before dawn, sealed with ink and silence. Power required sacrifice. He'd told himself that so many times it almost sounded noble. Almost. His penthouse smelled of expensive whiskey and regret. He stood before the mirror, adjusting the tie he didn't care about, preparing for a meeting that meant nothing. The reflection staring back at him was flawless, a man carved from ice and ambition. No trace of the one who'd sat beside a hospital bed. Whispering apologies into the dark, by noon, headlines flooded the feeds. Aiden Cross engaged to Evelyn Grant, the merger of empires. The photos showed them side by side. Evelyn's smile was perfect, rehearsed, practiced, hollow. Aiden's, colder still. The press called it a power alliance. They didn't call it what it truly was, a burial. Lena woke to emptiness. The sterile white walls blurred before her eyes, and for a moment she thought the quiet meant safety. Then she saw the flowers already wilted, the chair beside her, bed empty, the ring of his watch that used to rest on her nightstand gone. She waited for him. An hour. A day, no message came. When she turned on the TV, she saw his face. The news played the engagement announcement again and again, his arm around Evelyn Grant, heir to Grant International. The same woman he'd once mocked as plastic ambition in heels, her breath caught in her throat, the world tilted. The man who'd once sworn she was the only person he trusted now looked at another woman as if the last few months had never happened. The betrayal wasn't loud. It didn't break her instantly. It was quiet, surgical, a cut deep enough to bleed her soul dry. That night, the nurses found her discharge papers unsigned. By morning, she was gone. No one knew where. Not the hospital. Not the men who'd watched over her. Her apartment was stripped bare within 48 hours. No clothes, no photos, no trace. Even her digital footprint disappeared. Bank accounts closed. Numbers dead. Devices wiped. Lena Hale ceased to exist. Aiden buried himself in the world he understood best. Money, silence, and blood. His wedding was arranged for autumn. The underworld celebrated it as a ceasefire. The final act of a man too powerful to need love. At the engagement gala, Evelyn wore diamonds heavy enough to buy loyalty. She smiled up at him as cameras flashed. "You've changed," she said softly between poses. He looked at her but didn't really see her. People always do when they win, except he didn't feel like he'd won anything. Later, as champagne glasses clinked and toasts rose to the ceiling, Aiden caught his reflection in a mirrored wall. For a fraction of a second, he thought he saw Lena standing in the crowd, wearing that knowing half-smile that always disarmed him. But when he turned, she wasn't there, just air and memory. Months passed. Cross Industries expanded, absorbing smaller empires like a machine built to consume. Aiden's face graced magazines. Investors adored him. Politicians envied him. He owned everything except peace. Every night he walked through his penthouse, the silence followed him like a ghost, her laugh haunted. Corners that should have stayed dark, memory of her voice, the way it trembled when she said his name, echoed against walls lined with secrets. Told himself she was fine. He told himself she'd moved on, but the truth was simpler, sharper. He'd driven her away. Some nights, he opened his drawer and found the blood-stained cufflink from that night at the pier. He couldn't throw it away. It was all that remained of the only thing that ever felt real. In another part of the city, a landlord entered Lena's old apartment to reclaim it. Dust coated the counters. The air was stale, untouched. Everything she hadn't taken was locked in one small drawer, forgotten, unremarkable. Inside lay a sealed envelope, a doctor's letter, dated 2 days before she vanished. The landlord tossed it aside at first, thinking it junk mail, but the corner caught his eye. Confidential. Private medical report. He unfolded it out of idle curiosity, eyes skimming the first line before freezing. Patient, Lena Hale. Subject, positive pregnancy confirmation. Estimated gestation 6 weeks. He stared at the words, not understanding their weight. Then slowly, he placed the letter back where he found it, closing the drawer as if it could bury the truth forever. Across the city, Aiden stood on his balcony, wind clawing at his shirt, the skyline glowing beneath him. He'd just returned from another deal, another war, another hollow victory. The city roared below, and still he felt nothing, no triumph, no satisfaction, just the echo of a name he wouldn't let himself say. He closed his eyes. Somewhere, in the darkness of his mind, he could still see her, smiling through the chaos, whispering that he wasn't the monster he believed himself to be. He opened his eyes again, but she was gone. The city didn't care about ghosts, and Aiden Cross didn't believe in miracles. Not yet. Miles away, in a quiet border town under another name, Lena sat alone on a train platform. Her hand rested gently over her stomach as the announcement board flickered above her. The world thought she'd vanished, but she was only beginning again. She looked down at the folded letter. In her lap, the doctor's confirmation, and whispered to herself, "You'll never know him, not like I did, but you'll have his eyes." Thunder rolled in the distance, and the train began to move. Lena stepped aboard without looking back. As the doors closed, a shadowed figure at the end of the platform watched her leave, a gloved hand lifting a phone to his. "Ear, boss," the voice murmured into the receiver. "She's alive. 3 years can change a man or bury him deeper in what he already was." The city no longer whispered Aiden Cross's name with fear. Now, it said it with awe. The once cold prodigy of New York's underworld had become an empire of one, untouchable, unchallenged, unstoppable. He moved like a phantom through the high-rise corridors of Cross Industries, every step echoing authority. Every rival had either bent the knee or vanished quietly into the night. Every deal he struck turned to gold. Power, it seemed, had no limit, until something began to chip away at it. It started with the docks. One morning, his logistics chief came to him pale as salt. "Sir, Pier 27's been bought out. Private holding company. Silent partner." Aiden didn't look up from his papers. "Buy it back. Already tried." The bid was blocked. The buyers protected by a trust. He finally raised his eyes. Name? LH Holdings. The letters didn't mean anything then. Just another shell company playing games with sharks. He shrugged it off, signing another contract, closing another deal. But within weeks, the pattern grew. LH Holdings acquired his warehouses. Then a shipping line he'd used for years. Then one of his smaller front corporations, his oldest. most discreet laundering route. When he tried to buy them back, every deal died on the table. No leaks, no loopholes. Whoever was behind it knew his playbook better than anyone alive. By the time he noticed how deep the infection ran, it was already too late. He'd lost 6 major operations and 2 key investors, men he'd thought were unbreakable. Every asset was being swallowed whole by a ghost. Could be Dante, his head of security said, pacing the room. The bastard's been quiet for too long. Maybe he's building back under a different name. Dante Moretti doesn't do quiet, Aiden said coldly. He does blood and fireworks. This... He gestured to the glowing reports. This is precision. Then who? Aiden's jaw tightened. Someone who knows me. That night in his penthouse office overlooking the city, he spread the files across his desk. Each company name, each transaction, each coded movement glared up at him in neat digital order. LH Holdings was a ghost, but it moved with purpose, and that purpose felt personal. He studied every document, every purchase trail, every offshore account that masked the real. Buyer dot nothing, just a wall of encryption and anonymous intermediaries. Then he saw it, a signature buried in the fine print of an old land transfer form. 3 looping letters, elegant, familiar. LH Aiden froze. For a long time, he couldn't move. He'd seen those letters before. Not in business, not in contracts, but at the bottom of handwritten notes she used to leave on his desk. Meeting moved to 8. Don't forget to eat. Lee, the handwriting had been graceful, deliberate, unforgettable. Lena Hale. It couldn't be. She was gone. Dead even, if the rumors were true. He told himself it was coincidence, a ghost of memory. But the more he looked at those letters, the less he believed it. The next morning, Evelyn noticed his distraction. They were in the ballroom of the Grant estate, finalizing the details for their wedding, press, dignitaries, the kind of people who pretended they weren't terrified of the cross name. She reached for his arm, smiling in that flawless porcelain way she'd perfected. "You're not even here," she teased lightly. "Where's your mind, Mr. Cross?" "On business," he said, voice clipped. "Business can wait." "Our wedding can't," he forced a polite smile. Cameras flashed as planos surrounded them. To anyone watching, they looked perfect, power incarnate. Inside, Aiden felt nothing but a low-rising hum of unease. That evening, he called his tech division into the war room. "Find everything on LH Holdings," he ordered. "I don't care what it costs. Track the source." Hours later, his lead analyst came in, face pale. "Sir, it's not a single entity. It's a network, tied to multiple offshore accounts, all leading to charitable investments." "Charities?" "Yes, hospitals, schools, recovery programs. Every move is legal, clean, but every acquisition cuts directly into your control." Aiden leaned back, jaw clenched. "So whoever this is, they're not after money." The analyst swallowed. "No, sir. They're after you." For the first time in years, Aiden couldn't sleep. He walked the penthouse at 3 a.m., barefoot, shirt undone, staring at the city that once knelt to him. Each light in the skyline flickered like an accusation. He poured himself a drink, but didn't touch it. The letters haunted him. LH, the ghost initials. He opened his safe. Inside were files from her old employment. Photos, old ID copies, the HR record he'd never deleted. He stared at her picture. Lena, smiling faintly, eyes calm, blue-gray, unafraid. He whispered to the empty room, "If you're alive, what do you want from me?" The silence answered. A week before the wedding, his empire began to tremble. 2 of his lieutenants defected. The mayor cancelled a long-standing agreement. One of his offshore accounts, one only he knew about, was frozen. Overnight, Aiden smashed the glass on his desk. Someone wasn't just attacking his business. They were dismantling him, and the worst part? They were doing it with his own methods. Clean, precise, ruthless. He'd built a legacy of fear. Now someone was using it to erase him. The wedding loomed closer. Paparazzi filled the streets outside his penthouse, desperate for a glimpse of the untouchable billionaire and his polished bride. He stood before his mirror again, buttoning the same flawless black suit he'd worn 1,000 times before. His reflection stared back at him, controlled, calm, and hollow. Power was supposed to make him immortal. Instead, it made him haunted. He was halfway to the door when his assistant appeared hesitant. "Sir, this arrived for you." She handed him a white envelope. No return address, no seal, just a handwritten note on the front. Aiden Cross. The handwriting froze him where he stood. The elegant loops, the tilt of the letters, the faint pressure mark where the pen had lingered. It wasn't possible. It was her handwriting. He dismissed the assistant and sat down slowly, the envelope heavy in his hand. His heartbeat pounded against his ribs. He broke the seal. Inside was a single card, white, scented faintly of jasmine. He read the words once, twice, 3 times. "Congratulations on your wedding, Mr. Cross. It seems ghosts do invest well after all. See you soon." Dick, his hand went numb. He stared at the card until the letters blurred. Lena Hale, alive, watching, moving. Pieces against him from the shadows. A cold wind swept through the penthouse as he set the card down. He turned to the glass wall, staring out at the skyline, and saw, in the reflection of the opposite tower, a light flicker 3 times in deliberate sequence. A signal, their old code. His pulse spiked. He whispered, half in disbelief, half in warning, "Lena." And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse lit by the same storm-gray sky, a woman watched him through a scope, eyes calm, voice low as she spoke into her comms. Phase 1 complete. The devil remembers. The night was built for perfection. Gold dripped from every corner of the ballroom. Chandeliers raining light upon marble floors polished so bright they looked like frozen stars. The elite of the city filled the hall, politicians, investors, criminals in tailored suits pretending to be gentlemen. They all came to witness the union of power itself. Aiden Cross stood at the center of it all, flawless in his black tuxedo, a glass of champagne balanced carelessly in his hand. Cameras loved him. The press called him the untouchable king. Beside him, Evelyn Grant shimmered in silver silk, a smile etched like porcelain, the embodiment of grace and ambition. The orchestra played something slow and expensive. Flashbulbs strobed like lightning. And yet, through all the noise, he felt nothing. Not joy, not peace, just the faint, hollow rhythm of a heart that refused to feel alive. The master of ceremonies raised his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Mr. and Mrs. Aiden Cross." Applause thundered. Champagne spilled. Cameras swarmed. Aiden smiled for the crowd, every movement rehearsed, controlled, immaculate. He was untouchable, unshakable, until the doors at the far end of the ballroom opened, and silence swallowed the room whole. At first, no one moved. The sound of heels echoed on marble, slow, unhurried, deliberate, the kind of sound that demanded attention without asking for it. Aiden turned toward it, more out of instinct than curiosity. Then he saw her. Lena Hale, alive. Real. Walking through the doorway as if she owned every breath in the room. She wore black, simple, flawless, deadly. Her hair fell in soft waves, her eyes steady and unflinching. In her arms she carried 2 small boys, no more than 2 or 3 years old. The crowd parted around her like scripture meeting sin, and for the first time in his life, Aiden Cross forgot how to breathe. The whispers began before she even reached the center of the room. "Who is she? Is that? She looks like..." Evelyn's perfect smile flickered. Aiden didn't move. Couldn't. He just stared at the impossible made flesh. Lena walked closer, every step cutting through the silence like a blade. The boys clung to her sides, dressed in small black suits, eyes bright and unafraid. Blue eyes. The exact shade of his own. Aiden's grip tightened around the glass in his hand until it shattered. The crowd gasped. He didn't notice the blood. She stopped before him unshaken, calm as a storm about to break. "Congratulations, Mr. Cross," she said, her voice low and even. "Your empire looks smaller in person." It wasn't anger that laced her tone. It was control, precision, the kind of calm born from surviving fire. Aiden couldn't form words. Every part of him screamed to ask how, why, when, but his tongue felt chained to the floor. Evelyn took a step forward, recovering her composure with the grace of a woman who'd rehearsed every outcome, except this one. "And you are?" she asked, voice brittle under the weight of the silence. Lena's gaze didn't waver. "Someone who used to believe in him." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Phones lifted discreetly. Reporters leaned forward like wolves smelling blood. Aiden's pulse pounded in his throat. "Lena," he managed, the sound barely a whisper. Her expression didn't change. "You remember my name?" "That's a surprise." The words hit harder than bullets. Security moved instinctively, but Aiden raised a hand. "No one touches her." Lena tilted her head slightly. "Still giving orders, I see. Why are you here?" he demanded, the steel in his voice fracturing under the weight of emotion he couldn't hide. She looked past him, to the massive ice sculpture bearing the intertwined initials A and E. A faint smile ghosted her lips. "I came to see if the devil still wore his crown." The orchestra, unsure what to do, faltered to a stop. The silence felt infinite. Evelyn stepped closer to Aiden, her hand curling around his arm in a gesture that screamed ownership. "Security," she said again, firmer. "No," Aiden repeated. His tone dropped, dangerous now. "They stay where they are." The crowd shifted uneasily. Lena adjusted the boys at her side. Her composure never cracked. She looked at Aiden, not with hate, but with something worse. Pity. "You look tired," she said softly. "Still chasing ghosts?" "Where have you been?" "Far from you," she answered. Her gaze flicked briefly to Evelyn. "Congratulations. Miss Grant, you finally have what you always wanted, a throne built on someone else's bones." Evelyn's face hardened. "You're trespassing on a private event." "Then call the police," Lena said evenly. "They'd love to hear about the weapons deals signed under your fiancé's name." The air froze. Gasps scattered through the room like sparks. Aiden's temper flared. "Enough!" Lena looked back at him. "Oh, I agree." Then quieter, almost tender. "You've punished yourself long enough, haven't you?" The tension cracked like glass under heat. Evelyn's PR team rushed forward, whispering frantic instructions. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Lena leaned closer to Aiden, her voice barely audible. "You didn't even read the letter, did you?" His brow furrowed. "What letter?" Her lips curved in a sad smile. Of course not. Before he could speak again, one of the boys tugged at her hand. He was small, dark-haired, bright-eyed, impossibly familiar. He dropped something metallic that hit the marble floor with a sharp clink. Every sound in the room died again. Aiden looked down. It was a cufflink, silver engraved, with the initials AC, the twin of the one he'd lost the night Lena was shot. His blood ran cold. The boy blinked up at him, curious, unafraid, eyes the exact blue of his own. Lena bent down, picked up the cufflink, and placed it in Aiden's hand. Her fingers brushed his, warm, real, electric with everything unsaid. "For luck," she murmured. Then she turned away. Cameras exploded in flashes again. Security scrambled, the crowd murmured louder than before, but Aiden didn't move. He just stood there, holding the cufflink, his reflection fractured in its polished silver. Evelyn hissed under her breath, "Who are they?" He couldn't answer. Lena walked slowly towards the exit, the twins beside her, small hands clutching hers. Every step she took carved silence behind her. as if the whole room was too stunned to breathe. At the door, she paused. For the briefest second, she looked back, not at the crowd, not at Evelyn, but at him. Her gaze held everything she hadn't said. The love, the betrayal, the loss, the warning. Then she disappeared into the light beyond the doorway. Aiden stood motionless, glass shards glittering at his feet, blood seeping from his palm where the cufflink's edge bit into his skin. He felt the weight of the entire room pressing down, questions, eyes whispers. But all he could hear was the echo of her voice. "You didn't even read the letter, did you?" Minutes later, after security cleared the scene and guests dispersed in scandalized silence, Aiden found himself alone. The cufflink lay in his hand, its twin long hidden in a drawer he hadn't opened in years. He walked to his office, every step mechanical, and opened the drawer. Inside, exactly where he'd left it, gleamed the original cufflink. He placed the new one beside it. Together, the pair formed a perfect set, mirror images, flawless, complete, and then he saw it. Inside the hollow of the one he'd just received, barely visible under the engraving, was a microchip. He held it to the light. It blinked once. His phone buzzed and an encrypted message appeared on the screen. "Welcome back to the game, Aiden. This time, you're not the only one playing for blood." The storm began quietly. Not the kind that cracks the sky, but the kind that brews beneath the surface of a city already drenched in sin. For 3 years, Aiden Cross had ruled unchallenged. Now, every corner of his empire whispered one name: LH Holdings. No one knew who owned it. No one dared to ask, until she walked back into his world, shattering every illusion of control he still believed he had. The next day after the wedding, his office reeked of cigarette smoke and betrayal. The skyline glowed through the glass. But Aiden's focus stayed on the list of companies slipping from his grasp: shipping routes, real estate, offshore accounts, each traced back to the same unmarked entity. LH Holdings. He'd built his empire on fear. Now someone was dismantling it with precision, quietly, surgically, like a ghost who knew exactly where to cut. And when the ghost wore the initials LH, he knew Lena Hale, the woman he'd buried beneath gold and guilt, the one he'd sworn he'd never see again. When she agreed to meet, he expected the woman he remembered: gentle voice, nervous eyes, soft edges that didn't belong in his world. But the Lena who stepped into his private club wasn't that woman. Her entrance silenced the room. Every suit turned, every breath stopped. She wore black, sleek, unyielding, the color of vengeance wrapped in grace. Her hair was swept back, revealing a face sharper than memory. The timid secretary he'd once known was gone. In her place stood a queen who'd learned to command her own kingdom. Aiden rose from his seat, but words deserted him. "Lena," he said finally, his voice low, almost reverent. She smiled faintly, not warmly. "Mr. Cross," she corrected. "We're not on first-name terms anymore." The air between them was charged, brittle, dangerous. They faced each other across the table like adversaries signing a treaty. But the undercurrent beneath her composure made his chest tighten. Fear. It flickered there, deep behind her eyes, something she didn't want him to see. "You've built quite the empire," Aiden said, trying for calm, though his pulse was unsteady. "I didn't think you had it in you." Her laugh was soft but edged with venom. "You left me for wealth," she said. "So I learned to make more." Her words cut deeper than any bullet. He leaned forward, voice dark. "Why come back?" "Because power deserves to be reclaimed," she said, her tone even. "And because you need to see what you created." For a heartbeat, silence filled the space between them. He wanted to tell her she'd become everything he once admired and feared: brilliant, untouchable, dangerous. But admiration wasn't something men like him could afford. Do you hate me that much? He asked quietly. I don't hate you, she said, meeting his gaze without flinching. I outgrew you. The words landed like gunfire, precise, final, lethal. He should have admired her strength. Instead, he felt something break in his chest, something he hadn't realized was still intact. He stood, walking toward her slowly, as if drawn by something beyond reason. Why the fear, then? He murmured, eyes narrowing. You've built walls higher than mine. What are you so afraid of? Her jaw tightened. You think I'm afraid? I know you, he said, voice low, dangerous. You hide it well, but it's there. Someone's coming for you. Her silence was confirmation enough. She looked away first. The world you built doesn't forget, she said. You taught me that. The temperature in the room shifted. The guards outside straightened as the hum of tension rippled through the air. Aiden's instincts sharpened. He'd lived too long in shadows not to feel danger approach. Who? He demanded. Her eyes flicked toward the window for a fraction of a second. That was all it took. A flash of light. A soft red beam danced across her shoulder. Time stopped. Aiden's body moved before sought. He lunged, yanking her down behind the table as the glass shattered above them. A bullet sliced through the air where her head had been. Screams erupted outside. The guards drew their weapons. Lena's breath came in shallow gasps as he shielded her with his body. Her pulse thundered beneath his hand. He caught the glint of the rifle across the street. A high vantage. Professional distance. This wasn't random. This was a message. Who sent them? He hissed, his voice a mixture of fury and fear. Her eyes flicked to the window, then to him. For the first time, her confidence cracked. Someone who wants both of us gone, she said softly. Someone who knows what we both did, Aiden's mind raced. Dante, Evelyn's father, a rogue faction within his own syndicate, but none of them would have chosen this moment. None of them would have dared touch her unless she'd stolen from someone worse than him. He grabbed her arm, dragging her toward the side exit as gunfire tore through the walls. Move, he snapped. I can handle myself, she shot back, jerking free, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Outside, chaos erupted. Men screamed orders. Engines roared. Somewhere in the noise, a child's cry echoed in Aiden's memory. Sharp, disorienting. He shoved the thought away. Bullets ricocheted off metal as he pulled her behind a pillar. Still think you're untouchable? He growled. She met his eyes, fury and fear tangled in equal measure. You taught me to fight monsters, she whispered. You never said what to do when I became one. For a moment, he couldn't speak. When the gunfire finally ceased, they stood in silence, breathing hard, the city around them trembling from the violence. She turned to him, eyes shining not with tears but with something colder. You still think I need saving? She asked. Aiden looked at her, and in that instant, he understood something he hadn't before. He'd built her to survive him, and she had, too well. Police sirens began to wail in the distance. Aiden's phone buzzed, his men asking for orders. He ignored it. Instead, he watched her step toward the shattered glass wall, the skyline burning behind her. Her reflection flickered beside his, a perfect mirror of power and ruin. You don't have to run, he said finally, voice rough. Not from me. She turned her head slightly, her profile carved in pale moonlight. I'm not running, she whispered. I'm just not done yet. She started to walk away, heels clicking against the marble floor. Each step a declaration of defiance. He took a step forward, his voice breaking through the tension. Lena. But she didn't stop. Then he saw it, a red dot, steady, silent, moving again across her shoulder. His blood ran cold. Get down, he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. She froze, eyes widening in shock as the sniper sight tightened on her heart. Aiden moved, too fast to think, too slow to stop what came next. The glass shattered again. The bullet screamed through the air. Time fractured. The world fell silent as the shot echoed. Lena's body jolted backward. Her expression, unreadable as crimson, bloomed across her shoulder. Aiden caught her before she hit the floor, his hands slick with her blood. Her breath came in shallow tremors as she whispered, "It's not over, Aiden. He's still alive." Her eyes fluttered shut, and somewhere beyond the chaos, on a rooftop across the street, a man lowered his rifle, Dante Marino, smiling coldly into the night. "Round two," he muttered, vanishing into the dark. Night fell like a warning. Rain slicked the streets of the city, washing blood and ambition down the gutters. Aiden Cross stood in the middle of his war room, staring at the name flashing on the screen, Dante Marino, confirmed alive. The impossible had a face again. For years, Aiden had believed Dante was dead, burned in that final raid, his empire reduced to ash. But ghosts in their world never stayed buried. Now he was back, and this time he wasn't after money. He wanted something far more personal. Across the city, Lena Hale sat in her office at LH Holdings, her reflection fractured across glass. The wound in her shoulder still ached beneath the bandage, but pain had become a language she spoke fluently. Reports covered her desk, security breaches, false invoices, encrypted messages. All of it pointed to the same invisible hand tightening around them. She knew that hand. Dante Marino had been Aiden's rival once, his shadow in business, his reflection in cruelty, and he'd nearly destroyed her life before disappearing. Now he was back for the only leverage that could break both of them, her sons. The twins were playing in the next room, their laughter faint but steady, grounding her amid the chaos. No one outside her closest circle knew they existed. At least, that's what she believed. Her head of security entered, Marcus, broad-shouldered, reliable, the kind of man who never smiled because he'd seen too much of the world. "We've doubled the guards at every exit," he said. "No one gets near them without my clearance." Lena nodded, though unease coiled in her stomach. She'd learned the hard way that safety was an illusion, but she needed to believe it, for their sake, if not her own. Across town, Aiden's men intercepted a convoy outside one of his docks. Every crate was marked with Dante's insignia, a serpent coiled around a blade, a declaration of war. Aiden watched the footage in silence. His reflection on the glass looked older, colder. "This isn't business," he muttered. "It's personal," his advisor hesitated. "Sir, there's something else. Dante's been buying inside information. He's found a leak in your circle." Aiden turned sharply. "Who?" No answer. Just silence thick enough to taste. Hours later, the phone on Lena's desk rang once. Aiden's voice came through, low, edged with steel. "He's after the boys." Her pulse froze. "You knew." "I found his message," Aiden said. "He's playing us both. He wants me to bleed and you to break." Lena's composure cracked for the first time. "Then we stop him together." The words hung in the air, dangerous and raw. Aiden didn't hesitate. "Send me your location." For 3 years they'd lived as enemies. Now, they had no choice but to stand on the same side of the fire. By nightfall, the Cross Mansion became a fortress. Guards patrolled every corridor, weapons drawn. The twins were brought inside, their small hands clutching each other's tightly. When Aiden entered, the boys stared at him, wide-eyed, uncertain. He knelt slowly, meeting their gaze. For a heartbeat, the world fell silent. They had his eyes. Something inside him fractured quietly. Completely, he turned to Lena. "You should have told me." "You would have walked away again," she said, her tone flat. And they needed more than promises from a man who forgets how to stay. Her words hit harder than any bullet. But he said nothing. There would be time later, for truce, for forgiveness, if they survived this night. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, betrayal was already taking root. Marcus, the man Lena trusted most, watched from the security booth. His phone buzzing in his pocket. A message blinked on the screen. Payment confirmed. "Deliver them tonight." He hesitated only once before deleting the text. His eyes flicked to the monitors showing the twins in their room. Then he stood, adjusting his earpiece. Everyone had a price. His had just been met. Hours passed. Aiden and Lena stood in the study. Old memories buried beneath new fury. Blueprints of Dante's known operations sprawled across the table. Routes, hideouts, bank transfers. The pattern was clear. Dante had been watching them for years. He waited for us to destroy each other, Aiden said grimly. And now, Lena finished, he's cashing in. Their eyes met, the air between them electric with old pain and unspoken truths. For a moment, she almost reached for him, then stopped herself. Trust was a luxury they no longer owned. Down the hall, the twins slept under dim light. Marcus entered quietly, face unreadable. He switched off the camera feed, one by one. When the last monitor went dark, he whispered, "I'm sorry." Voice, a soft click. A door opened, then silence. In the study, Aiden's phone buzzed. His second-in-command's voice came through, strained. "Sir, we've got movement. One of your trucks just left the compound." "Unauthorized," Aiden frowned. "Whose clearance?" "Marcus!" Lena's breath caught. She bolted from the room, running down the corridor. The boys' room was empty, the window shattered. Curtains flapped in the cold night air. 2 small beds stood unmade, still warm. Her scream tore through the mansion like gunfire. Aiden was already outside, barking orders into his radio. "Lock the gates! Shut every route in and out of the city." Engines roared to life, tires screeching across the gravel. Lena stumbled out after him, rain soaking through her dress, her voice breaking. "He took them, Aiden." He took them. He grabbed her by the shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "We'll get them back," he said, his tone deadly calm. "I swear to you, I'll burn the world before I let him touch them." Lightning split the sky as his men sped off into the night. Hours later, the first car was found abandoned near the docks, empty, blood on the seats. 2 small jackets left behind. A message was carved into the dashboard with a knife. "You took my future. I'll raise yours." DM Lena's knees buckled. Aiden caught her before she fell, fury boiling beneath his skin. Every sin he'd buried was clawing its way back to the surface. This was his punishment, his empire, his greed, his betrayal, coming home to collect. He turned to his men. "Voice Ice, find Marcos. Bring him to me alive." But they didn't have to. A phone rang nearby, vibrating against a wooden crate. Aiden picked it up. Dante's voice slid through the line. "Smooth and venomous. Tell me, Cross," he said. "Do they have your eyes or hers?" Aiden's grip tightened until the phone cracked. "Touch them and I'll end you myself." Dante laughed softly. "You already did once. Didn't stick. Let's see how you do when the stakes are blood." The line went dead. Back in the mansion, Lena sat by the fire, shivering, her mind a battlefield of fear and guilt. Her world had been rebuilt to protect her children, and now it was unraveling piece by piece. Aiden entered quietly, soaked, his expression carved from stone. "Every road leads back to him," he said. She didn't look up. "Then we go to him," he hesitated. "Lena," she stood, meeting his gaze. "I won't lose them. Not like we lost everything else." For the first time in years, he saw the same fire in her eyes that had once made him fall in love. Only now, it was forged in pain. Outside, thunder roared again. Aiden's phone buzzed with a new message, anonymous. He opened it, and his blood ran cold. A photo. The twins, blindfolded, sitting in the back of a black van. Behind them, a figure he knew all too well. Marcus. Beneath it, a single line of text. "Every empire pays for its foundation in blood." Aiden crushed the phone in his hand, rage burning through every nerve. He turned to Lena, eyes like frost. "He sold us," he whispered. "My right hand. My brother." She stared at him, pale and trembling. "Then what do we do now?" He looked toward the storm outside, voice low and lethal. "We start a war." Lightning flashed, brief, blinding, and in its glow, a sniper's lens glinted again from the rooftop across the street. Watching them both, The night was made of fire, and Aiden Cross walked straight into it. The old harbor warehouse, Dante, Marino's final fortress, rose like a steel skeleton against the rain. Every light glared like an accusation. Every sound whispered his name. He moved through the shadows with lethal precision, black coat soaked, pistol drawn. Around him, his men formed a phalanx of fury and loyalty. They'd followed him into hell before. Tonight would be no different. But this time, the war wasn't for power. It was for blood, for family, for redemption. Positions, he growled into the calm. No survivors. Gunfire erupted before the last word left his mouth. Windows shattered. Sirens wailed. Alarms screamed through the dark. Aiden advanced through the chaos, his heartbeat pounding like war drums. Every enemy that fell was another sin, confessed. Every bullet that found its mark felt like penance carved into his flesh. He kicked down a door. Dante's, men waiting behind it, two went down before they could raise their guns. A third lunged at him with a knife. Aiden disarmed him with a twist, sending steel into the man's chest without hesitation. The blade dropped with a dull clang. Blood sprayed across the wall, painting his shadow. For once, he didn't look away. In the upper floors, the air was thick with smoke and fear. The twins were somewhere inside. He could hear faint cries echoing through the vents. Soft, terrified, familiar, his sons. He gritted his teeth and pressed forward. Through the shattered corridor, a voice boomed through the loudspeakers. "You came alone?" Dante's laughter echoed, distorted, mocking. "You always were predictable." Cross, still playing the hero no one asked for. Aiden fired a round into the ceiling. "Step into the light." "Coward! Oh, I will," Dante replied, his tone dripping with venom. "When there's something left of you to talk to." The sound of grinding metal filled the air. Somewhere below, heavy doors slammed shut. The trap was already in motion. Downstairs, Lena and her strike team breached the south entrance. Her face was pale, eyes hollow but determined. She'd promised herself she wouldn't cry. Not until she saw her boys again. Not until she knew whether Aiden had survived long enough to keep his word. "Sector 2 cleared," one of her men shouted. She didn't respond. Her focus was razor sharp, locked on the path ahead. If Dante had touched her children, she refused to finish the thought. Upstairs, Aiden kicked through another steel door, and there they were. The twins, bound but unharmed, huddled in the center of a cargo bay. Relief hit him like a bullet to the chest. He rushed forward, cutting the ropes with trembling hands. The boys looked up at him, eyes wide, blue as his own. "Papa?" one whispered. The word broke him. He pulled them close, his heart cracking open under the weight of it. "I've got you," he said, voice shaking. "You're safe now." But safety was an illusion he'd long forgotten how to believe in. Dante stepped from the shadows, clapping slowly. A pistol gleamed in his hand. "Well," he said. "The family reunion I never got invited to." His smirk widened. "Touching. Really? You even cry now, Cross. Look at you, bleeding humanity all over my floor." Aiden pushed the boys behind him, raising his weapon. "Let them go." "You want me?" "I'm right here." Dante laughed. "You don't get it. I already have you. You just don't know what I've taken yet." Then, from behind Dante, Marcus appeared, face ashen, eyes hollow. The traitor, the brother who'd sold him out. "Marcus," Aiden said quietly, "you were family." Marcus hesitated, his hands shook. "He said he'd let them live. I swear." Aiden didn't let him finish. A single shot rang out. Marcus crumpled, dead before he hit the floor. Dante smirked. "Poetic. Kill one ghost, create another." Then he pressed a button on his detonator. A low hum filled the air. The walls vibrated. Red lights began flashing overhead. C4 lined through the entire foundation. The fortress was a bomb waiting to breathe. You built your empire on death, Dante said softly. It's only fair you die in the ruins of it. Aiden fired. Dante dove behind a column. Bullets shredded the walls, sparks flying as metal met fury. The twins screamed, covering their ears. Aiden moved fast, grabbing them, dragging them toward the exit. Dante's voice chased him. You think this ends with me dead? You think redemption is that cheap? A bullet tore across Aiden's side, hot pain ripping through him. He staggered but didn't stop, not when their lives were in his hands. He kicked open a service door, shoving the twins through it. Run to your mother, he ordered. Don't stop, no matter what. They hesitated. Papa, go! The boys bolted into the hallway, disappearing into smoke. Aiden turned back, gun raised, just as Dante emerged again, laughing through the chaos. Always the martyr, he said. Always bleeding for people who'll never forgive you. Aiden's voice was low, broken. Forgiveness isn't the point. Their eyes met. Both men knew this was the end. Aiden fired. Dante did too. Both bullets hit their marks. Dante fell first, blood blooming like a crimson flower across his chest. Aiden staggered, clutching his ribs, his breath shallow but defiant. The floor shook violently. The charges were armed. He limped towards the exit, smoke clawing at his lungs, flames devouring the room behind him. He could hear the twins shouting somewhere outside. Lena's voice screaming his name. He smiled faintly. Maybe this was what fate had always promised him. Not survival, but meaning. Not forgiveness, but choice. He stumbled once, catching himself on a broken beam. Then he saw the detonator still blinking near Dante's body. 30 seconds. He knew what had to be done. Outside, Lena reached the dockside, coughing through the smoke. The twins ran into her arms, sobbing, trembling. She looked past them toward the warehouse, its windows glowing orange from the inferno within. Aiden! She screamed. Her men held her back as the first explosion hit. The ground shook. Fire climbed the sky like a beast unleashed. Through the haze, she saw him, Aiden, stumbling out with flames at his back, dragging one broken beam aside to clear the path for the boys who were already safe. She ran to him, but he stopped halfway, blood streaming down his arm, his steps faltering. Don't, he said weakly. Stay back. She reached him anyway, clutching his face with shaking hands. His eyes, blue, steady, human again, met hers one last time. Tell them, he whispered. Their father was more than his sins. The second explosion ripped through the building. The blast wave hurled her backward, tearing him from her grasp. Then, silence. Hours later, the fire still burned. Emergency crews sifted through debris. No survivors were reported. Lena sat on the edge of an ambulance, the twins asleep in her arms. The night smelled of smoke and endings. Aiden's ring, scorched, bent, was the only thing recovered from the wreckage. She clutched it to her chest, tears finally breaking free. He had found redemption, and it had cost him everything, or so she thought. At dawn, as the ashes cooled, a lone figure watched from a distance, burned, bloodied, limping but alive. His eyes glowed faintly under the rising sun, haunted but unbroken. Aiden Cross. He turned away from the ruins, disappearing into the mist, whispering to himself, one last debt to pay. Behind him, Dante's insignia, the serpent and blade, was spray-painted across a surviving wall. Fresh, not old. Someone else had survived. Someone worse. Months had passed since the night of fire and ash. The city that once whispered Aiden, Cross's name with fear now spoke it only in half-remembered rumors. The Cross Empire had fractured and reformed under new names, its blood-stained roots buried beneath glass towers and polished press releases. But Lena had not buried her ghosts. She had learned to live beside them. LH Holdings had become a titan, in its own right, feeding entire districts, funding orphanages, rebuilding what men like Aiden and Dante had destroyed. In every headline, she was the embodiment of poise and resilience. Yet beneath the calm exterior, she carried memories like scars, reminders of the man who had taught her how to fight, how to survive, and ultimately, how to rule without mercy. Her sons were growing fast, two small reflections of the man she had loved and lost. One carried his quiet intensity, the other his reckless spark. They asked about their father sometimes, their innocent curiosity slicing deeper than any betrayal could. She told them he was brave. She told them he had saved them. She did not tell them that some nights she still woke, reaching for a heartbeat that no longer answered. Winter descended over the city like a sigh, softening even the harshest edges. Tonight the world seemed still, its sins covered in frost and candlelight. The grand hall of the Renford Hotel shimmered with crystal chandeliers and laughter. Lena's charity gala, a symbol of rebirth for a city tired of violence. Reporters thrived on her every move, admiring the woman who had turned ruin into empire. As she stepped into the ballroom, the crowd parted instinctively. Her black gown glimmered under the lights, every diamond on her wrist a victory. Yet behind the poise, her pulse was steady, controlled, trained by years of surviving chaos. She smiled when expected, greeted donors with warmth, and lifted her glass when cameras turned her way. Then she felt it, a pull, not seen but felt. The kind of awareness that once saved her life in rooms full of killers. Slowly, she turned her head toward the far end of the ballroom. Amidst the laughter, the champagne, and the music that pretended the city had no ghosts, one figure stood still. Aiden Cross, alive. He wasn't the devil in a suit anymore. The tailored perfection was gone, replaced by a simple black shirt beneath a charcoal jacket. A faint scar traced his jaw, the only visible remnant of the fire that should have consumed him. His eyes, the impossible blue she had once drowned in, were quieter now, shadowed by the cost of redemption. For a long moment, neither moved. The world blurred around them. Champagne glasses froze mid-air. Music became a whisper. Conversations faded into static. The air between them felt like the edge of a confession that neither dared to voice. He had come back from hell, and yet he didn't move closer. Lena's fingers tightened around her glass, but her expression never changed. 1,000 emotions warred beneath her composure. Shock, anger, something dangerously close to relief. But none escaped her face. She had built an empire from her pain. She could not falter now. He stood there silent, watching her laugh with strangers, his chest rising with a quiet ache. He had returned not to reclaim her, but to see what she had become without him. There was pride in his gaze, and something heavier, penitence perhaps. Their eyes met across the ballroom. No words passed, none were needed. The years, the betrayals, the blood, the love, all spoke through that single look. She saw a man stripped of his throne, but not his soul. He saw a woman who had turned his lessons into a legacy stronger than any gun or gold. Evelyn was gone, his empire in ruins. He owned nothing now, except the silence of the moment between them. Lena blinked first. She turned back toward the stage, where her sons were laughing beside their nanny, oblivious to the ghost in the room. The band swelled. Applause followed her name. When she looked again, he was already moving toward the exit. The crowd didn't notice him. To them, he was just another guest, another shadow slipping through the edges of a bright world. But Lena's eyes followed him until the last flicker of his silhouette disappeared beyond the ballroom doors. Her breath trembled once, just once, before she steadied herself again. She raised her glass for the final toast, her voice calm, poised, eternal. To the city that never stops rebuilding, she said. May we learn that some empires aren't built by power, but by love that refuses to die. The guests cheered, the chandeliers shimmered, and somewhere beyond the walls, a lone figure stepped into the winter night, coat collar turned against the wind. He didn't look back. Aidan Cross vanished into the streets that once bowed to him, content to live as a ghost in the world he had destroyed and saved. Lena stood on the balcony long after the gala ended, the city lights reflecting like fire in her eyes. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply whispered into the night, "I forgive you." Far below, in the darkness, a black car paused at a red light. Inside, Aidan's hand brushed over a small silver cufflink, the one his son had dropped on the night everything changed. He closed his fist around it and exhaled, a faint smile curving his lips. The light turned green, and the man who had once ruled the city disappeared once more, leaving behind only rumors and a single truth that no one could erase. In the city that once worshipped power, love became the only empire that refused to die. Weeks later, Lena receives an anonymous envelope at her office. Inside lies a single photograph. Aidan standing beside a black car, a faint outline of someone aiming at him from the shadows. On the back, written in bold red ink, "The past isn't done with us.